Welcome to KUJH Election Night coverage. I'm Sydney Clark. KUJH will be bringing you election updates at the top of every hour this evening.
And I'm Cameron McCrory. We've got live crews stationed at watch parties across campus, bringing us a special look at how students are feeling tonight.
It can be difficult to navigate the mouse amounts of races that are on your ballot this election season. Luckily, KUJH's Ryan Cartman has you covered on what you may find out on your ballot for state elections.
The city of Lawrence has multiple state elections on election night, and we'll take a look at 3 of them. Races for state senator, state board of education, and district attorney are all up for grabs. First, we take a look at the 3 Kansas Senate races in Lawrence. Districts 2, 3, and 19. District 2, highlighted in green, pits heavily favored incumbent Democrat Marcy Francisco and Republican David Miller against each other. Francisco has been in office since 2005, while Miller is a former member of the Kansas House of Representatives. District 3 in yellow is being vied for by incumbent Republican Senator Rick Clues and first-time political office seeker Dina Statler, a Democrat from Topeka. Democrat incumbent Tom Holland has held office since 2009 but decided not to run for re-election. Clues has represented Senate District 19 since 2021, while Statler will be the first woman with military service to serve in the state Senate. With Clues leaving District 19, highlighted in red, that puts 2 political newcomers in the spotlight looking to win the seat. 33-year-old Democrat Patrick Schmidt, a U.S. Navy veteran, is running against 26-year-old Republican Tyler Weibel, a property developer and general contractor. Lawrence has parts of 2 State Board of Education districts, but we'll take a look at District 6, highlighted in purple, which is being hotly contested this election. Incumbent Republican Dina Horst is not seeking re-election, leaving the seat up to 2 competitors in Democrat Beryl New and Republican Bruce Schultz. New is running on topics like accessible education and increasing graduation rates, while Schultz is running on issues such as school safety and parent-teacher collaboration. The most interesting race to look at for tonight is District Attorney, and for 2 reasons. First, for the first time in 20 years, a Republican will be running for DA, in this case career prosecutor Mike Warner. The second reason, the incumbent Democrat Suzanne Valdez lost in the primaries, winning less than 10% of the Democrat vote and losing to Dakota Loomis. This leaves a bit of an opportunity for Warner to come in and secure a seat Democrats have held for the past couple of decades. Though Loomis is the favorite in this race, Warner is betting on his experience to win it for him.
I have 30 years of experience as a prosecuting attorney, both at the state level and at the federal level. And what this office needs is experience. It needs somebody to come in and fix it because it's going to have to be rebuilt from the ground up.
Loomis, on the other hand, is running his campaign on reforming the justice system in the county.
I think the system works best when we can trust the system. And trust the system means treating people with dignity and respect, making sure their voice is heard, and making them believe the process has included them in a fair way.
With time winding down on Election Day, it's only a matter of time before we see who residents in Lawrence help elect to office. Reporting for KUJH News, I'm Ryan Cartman.
Thanks, Ryan. Later, we will take a look at where those candidates are standing in the polls.
And tonight, many will be relying on polls to see if their favorite candidates are winning. But where do those numbers actually come from? Let's find out.
To get an accurate percentage, a good survey will sample around 1,000 people. For that 1,000 people, there is about a 3% margin of error. For example, let's say a poll has candidate 1 at 49% and candidate 2 at 51%. The adjusted margin of victory would be between 5 and 11%. So candidate 1 is actually polling between 46 and 52%, whereas candidate 2 is polling between 48 and 54%. 1 point equals 2%, 2 points equals 4%, and so on. So pollsters would say candidate 1 is down by 1 point or candidate 2 is up by 1 point. Kat Romanova, a visiting assistant professor of communication studies, shares why polls aren't always an accurate representation of our whole country.
We're seeing the poll, like where is it coming from? What's the source? Was it a CNN poll or was it like a Fox News poll? Was it the poll that where they sampled the national population, like the whole population of the US, versus was it just among Fox News viewers or CNN viewers, right? Because it will tell us completely different things.
And when looking for a poll to trust, Romanova said it's also important to take a deeper look into how the poll is actually getting its numbers.
And speaking of polls, KUJH's Matthew Patillo is here to tell us where he is getting his poll numbers tonight, as well as giving us a look at current polls in the presidential and local elections. Matthew?
Thanks, guys. So this is what the election looks like going into tonight. This is the presidential map. You'll notice there are 6 key swing states currently grayed out on this map: Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Now, the candidates for the last 6 months have been focused on these 6 states because these are the ones that are going to decide the election. Now, there's a variety of ways that tonight's going to go, and if you watch any sort of news tonight, there's going to be one phrase that gets said way too much. That is too close to call. Truly, nobody knows what this election is going to end up, is going to look like at the end of the night. That's why we have an election. So I wanted to show you, this is the most likely situation that's going to happen at the end of the night. You'll notice the blue wall up here of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That traditionally goes for Democrats. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump have been spending a lot of time in those 3 states, along with the other swing states as well. But you'll notice the other 3 states, North Carolina, Georgia, Nevada, have been going for Trump. And there's a lot of polls that we use to make that happen. I want to show you one more scenario that could be possible out of tonight before I show you some polls, because Pennsylvania, really for tonight, is high noon for the election. Kamala Harris and her campaign knows that if they lose Pennsylvania, their chances of winning the election are slim to none. But what happens if she loses Pennsylvania? Well, she'll have to win either Georgia or North Carolina and Nevada all the way to the west. Now, the polls will start to close. Well, they just closed about 5 minutes ago in Georgia. That'll be our first results of the night, and we won't know results for that race until probably about 10 or 11 Central. Now, there's a few polls that caught my eye going into election night. Let me focus on one first. This is an Iowa poll that was released on Saturday. It was conducted by Ann Seltzer, who is generally considered to be the gold standard for polling, and the Des Moines Register, who sponsored the poll. Now, Iowa is a state that Trump won in 2020 by 10 points, and very obviously, he is very much down on this poll. He's down by 3 in this poll. That is bad news for Trump. I would not want to be the Trump campaign going into tonight. Now, this could be for a couple different reasons. We're seeing a post-Dobbs shift due to abortion being on the ballot in a lot of states, including Iowa, where they passed a 6-week abortion ban in July. We're also seeing a lot of over 65 white women shift from voting traditionally conservative for Donald Trump to shifting to voting for Harris and the Democratic Party. Now, there's one more point I want to show you that might give us a sense of how tonight might go. This is a poll that was sponsored by Univision and YouGov. It polled 400 Latino voters in the state of Pennsylvania. 64% of voters said they would be voting for Harris, 30% for Trump. Now, especially in a swing state like Pennsylvania, this is going to come down to 2 things: the margins and the turnout. And so these candidates are going to want every vote possible. And we were seeing a lot of depolarization during this election in the polls, but if you've been paying attention to the news, the Madison Square Garden incident that happened about a week ago, Latino voters are starting to overwhelmingly go for Harris. Now, that's the national picture. We're not going to have a sense of what that's going to look like until about 10 or 11 o'clock tonight. But one we will have a sense is the local election. Now, I want to draw your attention to this chart really quick. This was put out at 10:30 by the Douglas County Election Office. This is the turnout for the voting precincts here in Douglas County. I want to draw your attention to one number: 32,619. That is the amount of advanced ballots that were cast in this election. That is a record. In 2016, which was the previous record, 15,637 ballots were cast. They beat this election by more than half. We're seeing that trend across the country. Secretary of States and election officials are saying that people are turning out en masse, both advance and today. Now, there's 2 races that we're going to be focusing on tonight. The first one is the district attorney. The Democrat, Dakota Loomis, is faced up against Mike Warner, who is a Republican. the Republicans have not run a candidate for a Douglas County District Attorney for quite some time, so it'll be interesting to see how that race turns out. But the other one we're going to be paying attention to is the Douglas County Commission. Now, if you know anything about them, traditionally they do 3. This time they're doing 5, so it'll be interesting to see, especially with Eudora, Lecompton, and Baldwin City, how that ends up. We'll be paying attention to this all night. In the meantime, back to you guys in the studio.
Thanks, Matthew. He'll be back throughout the evening giving us more updates on numbers.
KUJH's Millie Favela is in studio to tell us about how Douglas County is safeguarding its mail-in ballot process. Millie.
Thanks, Sydney. For weeks, voters have been rushing to the polls to place their votes for one of the most important elections of our lifetime, the 2024 presidential election. Some individuals are unable to make it to the polls in person and are left to vote through the use of mail-in ballots. Over 200 mail-in ballots were not counted in the Douglas County primary election back in August, and these individuals were denied their ability to exercise their democratic right. These ballots were received after the deadline, even though they were postmarked in July. These ballots were scanned numerous times at the Kansas City Post Office before they were mailed to the Douglas County Elections Office. Ballots, their democracy.
For some, it is a choice where you could be able to vote on election day or vote in person in advance. But there are a number of voters, this is really the only option to vote. So we want to make sure that we safeguard that and make sure that that vote gets to us and gets counted.
So what is the county doing to ensure that every vote counts in this upcoming election? First, Douglas County is encouraging mail-in voters to apply for their ballots early and mail their completed ballots as soon as possible. Douglas County is currently the only county in Kansas with a live ballot tracker, which works similarly to tracking mail. With this tracker, Douglas County plans to work closely with the Kansas City Postal Office to ensure that no vote gets left behind. In Kansas, mail-in ballots postmarked before Election Day have 3 days to arrive at the elections office after the polls close, but the Kansas legislature has tried to do away with this in the past. Mail-in voters have already taken numerous steps to ensure that their vote counts in this upcoming election. They either registered to be on the absentee ballot list or requested a mail-in ballot. They then waited for the ballot, filled it out, and sent it back through the mail system. But restoring confidence in our voting system starts at the top.
Also, there are states that have a longer window for people to get their ballots in. And so we don't have to have a grace period as short as 3 days. The same individuals who are working to change that law, to take that grace period away, that's the same body of people who have the ability to make that grace period longer, to make sure that more votes are counted.
To track your ballot, mail-in voters can go to www.dgcoks.gov to sign up for updates regarding their ballot's location. Regardless of your beliefs about the election system, Douglas County is doing everything in its power to ensure that your vote counts in one of the most defining elections in our nation's history. Back to you, Sydney.
Douglas County residents voted on 24 items on their ballot today, including the presidential race. There are 2 national offices, 4 state, 5 county, 11 judicial retentions, and 2 questions on the ballot. And voters are eager to make their voice heard and express their right to vote.
It's really important that we use our right to vote. I mean, a lot of people fought for us to have the right to vote. I think it's a really important thing. We have to do our duty as a democracy, as citizens of a democracy, to uplift and uphold the beliefs we value. So I think that it's really important that if you have strongly held convictions and beliefs, that you should definitely get out there and vote today, no matter what your party is.
For Potter, this is the second presidential election she's voting in, but also the most exciting one for her.
I'm definitely more excited this time around, for sure. These options that we have are very important and can decide the fate of our country in the next 4 years. So yeah, I think that it's extremely important and a more interesting election for sure.
Not only is it important for citizens to express their right to vote, but also to make sure that polls are accessible for all Kansans. And the Kansas Elections Protection Team is doing just that.
Make elections as safe and accessible as possible. Our democracy is strongest when every eligible voter is able to vote, and that's kind of our mission. You know, making sure that things are ADA compliant, making sure there's poll workers, making sure electioneering isn't happening, just making sure that our elections are safe and accessible for all Kansans.
The Elections Protection Team is under the American Civil Liberties Union of Kansas and making sure that this election season Kansans are protected and safe at the polls. Voting closes at 7 p.m. tonight in Kansas, and as long as you were in the line before 7, you will be able to cast your vote.
For most college students, this is their first time getting to vote in a presidential election, and many are voting away from their home state. So I went down to Jayhawk Boulevard to ask if students are voting and how they're navigating it.
Well, I'm doing the absentee, so I already got my ballot in the mail. All it is now is me filling it out, really, putting it back in the mail and hoping that they can get it back in time. So it's honestly really simple. Just looked up online, Minnesota absentee ballot, filled out 2 quick forms, and it got to me in probably a week, not even.
I'm voting in person, so I'll be going back home on November 5th. I feel like it's going to definitely be chaotic, especially I live in like a blue county, but in a red state. So there are very much a lot of like contradicting views, especially when I go vote. But no, I'm also excited. It's my first time voting in like a presidential election.
I'm from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I'm voting by absentee ballot. It was really simple. My dad just brought a form, just wrote my name out, signed it. He signed it as a witness, and then just submitted my vote.
This is my first time that I can vote for a president, so I want to like go in person and like wait in line and get my sticker, so I'm going in person.
I think I'm gonna go home to my parents and then vote there. I've never voted before, so my parents are there, they know what they're doing. I can follow their example. I'm hoping it's not that busy. You know, more people are voting in elections now than ever, so it might be, but I think it'll be fun.
And a reminder, if you haven't voted yet, it's not too late. Kansas polling places will be open until 7 p.m. tonight.
And that's it for our 6 p.m. election update. We will see you back here at 7 with a live look at watch parties around campus.